Today on Controversial Issues, we're going to be discussing why should we listen to the rabbis. So sit tight. We'll be right back. Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Controversial Issues with Rabbi Chaim Coffman from the Holy Land. So today we're going to be discussing the oral law, the Talmud, and several different aspects about it. Welcome back, Rabbi. It's always a pleasure having you here in the studio with us. So, very good.
Always a pleasure, especially when you can hear me and hear the sound. We're good.
Yeah. If you were tuning in 5 seconds ago or a minute ago,
you heard nothing.
you saw some activity, but you didn't actually hear a word. So everything. So
my mime.
We are back and we are connected, nice and healthy now. So it's all good to go. So just as a little prequel to our topic here, years ago when I was Christian and I was Messianic for years, and the first thing I learned to do as being a Messianic was to I'm gonna say this, and it sounds kind of abrasive, but hate on the rabbis, because pretty much every Messianic rabbi that I met, and I've met like literally handfuls of them because I'd gone to the MJAA conferences, the Messianic Jewish Alliance, and met a lot of rabbis because I was a teacher myself, and of course a lot of you know my late father was a Messianic teacher, rabbi for about 28 years, and every one of them kind of dealt with it the same way. Even though they followed the oral law on a lot of aspects, they would wear the fringes, the tzitzit, they'd wear a yarmulke, but they would criticize everybody else for following the oral law, and that's exactly what they're doing by wearing those things and the lighting of the candle. That's all written in the oral law, and so for me, I found it very fascinating because even with myself, looking back at Christianity, they would say, or even the Messianics, they would say, well, you shouldn't, you should just take the Torah and that's it. But then I remember back being a Christian for so many years, and I remember everybody always said, well, when you study this, you need to study it right. And I'm like, well, so how do I do that then? They said, well, it's very easy. Just get you a Strong's Concordance, and if you have a word you don't know what it means, go there. It'll tell you what it means. And I'm like, wait, isn't that the same thing that you're criticizing the Jewish people for doing, except these people actually know what it means? So to me, it was very hypocritical. But it's still, for a long time, I was still tainted. I was still under that guidance, that wrongful guidance of really hating on the rabbis, and it's something it's taken me quite a few years to get past. And so anyway, that's what you're here for today. We're going to talk about this thing, several different features, mainly why listen to the rabbis, number one. Two, how do we know it's actually an oral tradition? And number three, how do we know it's the same as it was and it's not distorted over time? So we'll take this in whichever way you want to get it to start with.
Okay, we'll see how far we get with this.
Yeah, this could be more. This could be a 2 or 3 part, and it really could be. So we'll see.
Shut off the phone lines. We don't want any complaints. We want to get through something.
I do.
We want to get through something, right?
I do agree. Yeah. So very good. Go ahead.
So over the last number of weeks, there's been a number of been in contact with a number of people that multiple people that have had this issue. And the main issue is why in the world, should we listen to the rabbis? Why can't we just, as William said, why can't we just follow the Torah? Very simple. Just do what the Torah says. Not only that, they'll quote the verse in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy says that you're not allowed to add or subtract, right? So how the rabbis come along and say, okay, got to light Hanukkah candles, you got to light Shabbos candles. You got all these laws of Shabbos, right? They're all rabbinical. A lot of them, not all of them, right? A lot of them, are rabbinical. So they add to this, they add to that. How in the world, are they allowed to do that? And I think that's what, that's really the core, of what the question, what the question is, because essentially there is a lot of hypocrisy, because a Christian, a Messianic, cannot say we don't listen to the rabbis, and we'll show that why that is the case, that they certainly have to, so if they would say, I wouldn't have an issue if they would say we pick and choose. If they say we pick and choose what the rabbis say, it's one thing. If they say, and we're going to hopefully show clear as day, that, why they have, why there's no obligation to listen to the rabbis, but they cannot say we don't hold to the rabbis at all. One very simple reason is because if you look at a Torah scroll, right, you look at a written Torah, it's written in Hebrew, all consonants. There are no vowels, right? There's no ah, oh, ooh. There's no vowel sound, right? If there's no vowel sound, how in the world are you going to read it, right? What are the dots, right? The dots are the vowels. The dots themselves, we call them nikudot, right? Those are the vowels, so to speak. They came later. They came much later. So the question's going to be, how do I know if I have a Torah scroll in front of me, no vowels? How in the world do I know how to read it? So I'll give a few examples. One example is the word chet lamed beis. The word chet lamed beis could be read either chelev. What is chelev? Chelev is forbidden fat, right? And there's a major difference between what this word can mean. Because the Torah tells me, kol chelev lo tochelu. How in the world? Any forbidden fat, I'm not allowed to eat. Or does it mean chalav, chet lamed beis? You put the dots on, you put the vowels underneath it to say the word chalav. What does the word chalav mean? Milk. So according to this, it would mean kol chalav lo tochelu. Don't eat any milk. Don't drink any milk. What would that mean? Very simply, no milk products, right? No cereal, no milk with cereal, right? No cottage cheese, no milk products. Finished. No ice cream, nothing. So the question is, what does it mean? Right? Does it mean forbidden fat? Or does it mean milk? Now, there's a prohibition that's said 3 times in the Torah. It says, Lo tevashel gedi bechet lamed beis imo. It says, do not cook a calf. Now you got the word bechet lamed beis. Does it mean don't cook a calf? Don't cook a calf in its mother's, in its mother's fat. That would mean you can't eat anything fried. Well, that's half of our menu. We eat many things that are fried. That would be forbidden, right? Or does it mean do not cook a calf, right, or kid, really, in its mother's milk, right? That makes more sense, i.e., I can't mix milk and meat. Now, if you read it the other way, right, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, right? You would tell me I can't eat fried. Well, what am I going to do for Shabbos? What am I going to, no barbecue, right? No broiling, right? I can't deep fry anything, right? That's one example. You also have to know how to pronounce the words. There's the word Yud Resh Aleph Hey. The word Yud Resh Aleph Hey, you could pronounce it Yira, which means fear, right? It can mean fear of God or fear in general, right? You could pronounce it Yireh, right? If you have a segol, one of the vowels underneath it. And what would that mean? Right? That would mean you will see, right? He is going to see. Or you could pronounce it Yera'eh. What does Yera'eh mean? You're going to show. You are going to demonstrate. Now over here, you got the same letters, right? You have different vowels, different meaning, right? Pronunciation is crucial over here. Because if I don't pronounce it right, I could have a totally different meaning. Now, if you look at the Torah itself, we mentioned, right? How are you going to pronounce things, right? The only way you're going to pronounce things is if you heard them, right? If you didn't hear them, how in the world are you going to know how to pronounce it? You're not going to know unless someone told you, right? This is part of oral tradition. Now come along the Christians and the Muslims, and they are very good, extremely good, experts at misquoting the Torah. Misquoting, misrepresenting, mistranslating. I'll get the translation in a second. But what are they relying on? What is the Masoretic text? And this is game over. This is checkmate in my language. One aspect of checkmate. Why? Because they rely on a Masoretic text for a translation, even a bad translation. What's the Masoretic text? The Masoretic text has vowels. Who put in the vowels? Well, guess who? The rabbis put in the vowels. So a non-Jew, Christian, Muslim, Messianic cannot say, we across the board do not hold of the rabbis. That's a crock. That's a lie, right? Joey Suzu, he's lying. That's a total lie over here. Because how in the world unless they know Hebrew, which they don't, right? If they don't know Hebrew, how in the world are they going to know how to pronounce it? They have no idea. There's no possible way they'll understand how to pronounce it, right? One reason you need oral tradition is to know how to pronounce the words, right? Torah scrolls we mentioned, there's no punctuation. Now, for example, I'll give another example. It's actually a funny thing. Someone pointed out to me, there's a book that's called Eat, Shoots, and Leaves. Right? Now, it's a book on English punctuation. We'll give another thing in a second. This is kind of funny. It has a picture of a panda bear on a ladder. Now, it says eats, shoots, and leaves. Right? Now, if the panda's erasing the comma after the word eats, what do you have? Eats, shoots, and leaves. So why did you do that? Because if you say eats, shoots, and leaves, you're slandering the entire panda community. Because all you're telling is the panda eats, shoots, and he leaves. That's what he does. You take out the comma, right? If you erase the comma, then you tell me a panda eats, shoots, and he leaves. There's no big difference, right? No big difference. So it's an interesting thing. The great rabbi once, was speaking about this, and he said, people were in a no swimming area, right? Police came and said, hey, what are you doing here? It says no swimming allowed, right? So they said, what are you talking about? That's not the way you read it. You read no, comma, swimming allowed, right? Depends how you want to punctuate it, right? If I want to punctuate it that way, swimming's allowed. If I don't punctuate it that way, what does it mean? Can't swim, right? That would be, obviously simple way of looking at it, right? So where do you get punctuation from, right? We hear the Torah read in synagogue. There's a tune that's sung, right? There's punctuation in the Torah to start, stop, hesitation, go up, go down, whatever it is. Otherwise, how in the world are you going to be able to read the Torah, right? There's no punctuation. It's one long run on. How do I know where to stop? How do I know, how do I know where to go up? How do I know where to go down, right? So the first lie by the Christians, by the Messianics, by the Karaites going to have this issue also, is to say, we don't hold anything by the rabbis. Not true. Because even your bad, crummy translations, right, that you misrepresent and mistranslate are based on this, right? So for me, that's it. Either you tell me you pick and choose, and I won't have an issue. I'll have less of an issue. But if you tell me I don't hold by the rabbis, right, as you said before, what do you do about, why are you lighting Shabbos candles? Why are you wearing tzitzits, right? It's all from the rabbis, right? That's one thing, right? Second thing is 80% or more of the Torah is incomprehensible. Forget about reading it. It's incomprehensible what you do, right? There are no legal definitions. How can you have a book, right? 3,000 more words that does not give you any definition, right? In other words, there are a lot of laws in the Torah, and they tell you, do this, don't do that. But how can it not tell you any definition? Torah tells me the laws of Shabbos, you're not allowed to do any work, right? Whatever melacha is, however you want to define it, right? Physics, work equals force and displacement, distance. So what if I take a piece of paper, right? I take a piece of paper and I go, psh, and that work? Then I just move something, right? Isn't that work? How do we define what work is? But not only that, the Torah also tells me that if I do it on purpose, right? If I transgress Shabbos, then I die in this world, right? You get killed, corporal punishment, and you get spiritually cut off. Says it a number of times. Now, if the Torah doesn't give me any definition of what work is, how in the world can God say, okay, you die? That's it, it's game over. Everyone's going to die. We don't know what to do, right? We're not given any definition over here. That's one thing. Second thing is the Torah says on the 10th day of the 7th month. Yeah, we're talking about the holiday of Yom Kippur, right? But Torah doesn't tell me that. It just says the 10th day of the 7th month. How do we know when the day starts? Does the day start at sunrise? Does it start at night? Does it start when you see 3 stars? When does the day end? You got myriad questions here, right? On Yom Kippur, interesting, it says, V'nisem es nafshoseichem, right? Translated as, you shall afflict your soul. So what does afflicting your soul right? It doesn't define what that affliction is. If you just had a written Torah, you're going to tell me reading Dostoevsky, that is afflicting my soul. Reading Tolstoy, read War and Peace, right? Sleep on thumbtacks. That is affliction, right? That is suffering. But what does oral tradition tell me? Oral tradition tells me that it means I fast. But the Torah doesn't tell me that. The Torah doesn't tell me anything. The Torah just tells me you have an obligation on the 7th month, right? Sorry, the 10th day of the 7th month, right? And you have to afflict yourself. Doesn't tell you what day it is. Doesn't tell you how to afflict yourself. No definition. How can you have a legal book so thick, right? Greatest book written in the history of man. No definition, right? Torah says also, get into the 10 commandments, right? Torah says don't murder. Now, does the Torah give me any definition? What if it's self-defense? What if I pull the plug, right? When are you considered alive? What about a fetus? Which, what are the Christians going to tell you? The egg is fertilized. That's it. What if it's frozen? Can I destroy it? Is that life? What is the definition of life? So either the author of the Torah, God forbid, was an absolute idiot, right? And he gave us all these laws. Most of them make absolutely zero sense, right? Most of them, right? At least at face value. But he didn't give us any definitions. How, if the Torah tells me don't steal, right? The 10 Commandments, that really actually it means don't kidnap. But, let's just say for argument's sake, don't steal. Do we have any definition? How much? What if you're starving? Right? What if you have nothing else to eat? Right? How do you do, you're dying. You're dying in the desert. You see someone's got food. Knock them over, you take it. Saving a life, preserving a life. Does that take precedence? Doesn't it take precedence? Right? But what does the Torah tell me? Torah tells me don't steal. That's beautiful. But I have no legal definition. If I have no legal definition, how in the world am I ever going to know how to do anything? Right? Now, even if you're a Karaite, no matter, you're a Karaite, you're a Messianic, you need definition. Right? You're going to preach to your congregation. Right? Maybe you can answer me this. You're going to preach to a congregation, and they're going to say, oh, Rabbi, Messianic Rabbi, it says over here, don't steal. What does that mean? Sleep on it. Pray on it. It'll come to you. What do you mean it'll come to me? Tell me what it means. Right? Okay, so now I have to rely on the rabbis on the letters. Right? That it means don't steal. Good. We'll rely on them for that. But what about definition? Where is there a law book or a code book that tells me what I'm allowed to do, not allowed to do, with all these different things that seemingly have no definition? Right? Not only that, if God's going to punish, and he tells you many times, if you get it right, good, you get reward. If you get it wrong, then that's it. It's game over. You're going to get punished. You could die. You could suffer. There are many different things you can go through. But if God is all just, and we believe it's all just, well, how is that fair? How in the world is that fair? Right? You're going to get upstairs after 120 years, and you're going to be jumping up and down. You say, well, why did I die over here? God says you stole. You say, yeah, but I need it. I was starving. I didn't give you a right to steal. Don't bring me that thing, Pikuach Nefesh, save your life, whatever. Stealing's forbidden. Didn't you read it? That's what the Torah says. You got to figure out your own definition. Where do I figure out my own definition? What is it based on? Do I have a committee? Who decides? Right? If you like the conservative movement, okay, they'll pick and choose. Right? They'll admit, okay, this doesn't apply. We're not going to do it. This doesn't make sense. We're not going to do it. Some other things will do it a little bit according to our own definition. So if you want to tell me it's your own definition, you're going to make it up as you go along. Okay, that's one thing, right? But it's certainly got to be consistent. Certainly got to be able to, I would think you would have to be able to pass it down. Or even someone, commented that there are 50,000 Karaites in the world. I thought that was a pretty high number, but even so, if there are no definition, even if you have so many like that, even if you had 100,000, let's say you had 100,000, big deal, right? Bottom line is, can they pass it down to the next generation, right? You can make up your own definitions. I don't care. Does it work? The Torah says many times that this is forever. Now, certain things may not apply because the temple is destroyed, right? We can't bring sacrifices, can't do other things. Okay, there are certain things that won't apply because we messed it up. But it doesn't mean that these things don't apply forever. Torah says forever many times. How do you define that? Right? How in the world are you going to define that? I'll give my checkmate answer. I spoke Saturday night, right? We're going to read the book of Ruth. The Jews are going to read the book of Ruth on Shavuos. Ruth is a Moabite, right? Now Ruth, at the end of the book of Ruth, 3 generations that comes out of Ruth is none other than King David, right? The Davidic line comes from an incestuous relationship because she comes from Moab. Moab was a relationship between Lot and his daughters, right? One child, his daughter called Moab, right? What does Moab mean? Me'av, from my father. Okay, she wasn't living in Victorian England. She wasn't so modest. Fine, she called him Moab. Now everyone agrees, being in the book of Ruth, first chapter, Ruth is a Moabite, right? Daughter or granddaughter of the king of Moab, right? Whether daughter or granddaughter, it doesn't really matter. Point is, she is from Moab. Okay, 3 generations later comes King David. Now the Christians, for this is also crucial, because for JC, they want to prove that his lineage goes back to King David. Now the only problem is, historically, it's totally inaccurate because the Gospels have a different way to get there, right? So that's a little bit problematic because historically it's false. Because either you go through the same people or you don't go through the same people. Okay, that's a different issue, but they claim he goes back to King David. Now there's one major problem. One major problem. What's the major problem? Comes along Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 4. Right? 23, verse 4. What does the Torah tell me? Torah tells me a Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter the congregation of Hashem. Even their 10th generation shall not enter the congregation of Hashem to eternity. Now, what does eternity mean? Forever. Now, what do we understand about Ruth? She converted. Right? Whatever the conversion was, right? Not the topic for now, but somehow she converted, right? After the giving of the Torah, she converted. Good. So if she converted, what do you do with this verse? What in the world do you do? You're not allowed to come into a Moabite, right? She's a Moabite. She can never come into the congregation. She can't convert. Doesn't matter what you think, right? Someone brought me a few verses from Isaiah that if you keep Shabbos, you're a Jew. You can't be a Jew. Doesn't matter what's in her mind. Doesn't matter what's in her heart, right? I think I'm a Jew. I'm a Jew. All right, that's Bush League. Not even Bush League, right? Come on, you gotta do something for conversion. You can't just say, well, I'm just gonna be a Jew and that's it. But even if I would say that she could do that, even if she could, she can't enter the congregation. There's no possible way. So this is a massive question. It's a massive question because the future Redeemer of the Jewish people, and it's all over Ezekiel and Chronicles, that the future Redeemer of the Jewish people is going to come from King David himself. Has to be from the Davidic line. If she's a non-Jew and she cannot convert, there's no King David. He's a guy. How can the future of the Redeemer of the Jewish people be a non-Jew? And the Christian's going to be stuck up the gazoo also. What are they going to do? King David, he's a guy. Right? So where's JC's credibility? Where's his pedigree? His pedigree goes out the window. This is a major question. Right? So I had somebody that was trolling me. So I said, just answer me my question. What is the answer according to the Torah? Bring me from prophets. I don't care. Bring me a source anywhere in the Torah, anywhere in prophets, the writings, whatever it is. Show me how she's allowed to be part of the Jewish people. According to the Torah, no possible way. Right? So that means, so how do we know that King David's Jewish? There's only one way. We know that. And this gives the Christians, a little bit of hope. Not so much, but a drop of hope. To get the pedigree to King David, you have to rely on oral law. You can say, I don't hold of it, this, that. You can say whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Answer that question. That is a pretty serious question. And you're not going to find an answer in the Torah. That I can promise you. Right? It comes out in oral law, and that's exactly why, one of the reasons we read the book of Ruth, to show the power of oral law. Because if it wasn't for oral law, this whole thing never gets off the ground. There is no future Redeemer. There is no King David. It's over. Right? So therefore, Therefore, oral law, when we look at it, it's kind of like, if someone was taking a class in chemistry, right? You're taking a class in chemistry, you write short notes. So instead of writing down your notes, let's say for salt, what are you going to write? You write NaCl. You're going to write gold, you're going to write Au, right? Go back to the periodic table. These abbreviations, obviously, for different chemical reactions. Now, someone who wasn't at the class, someone that's not at the class comes in, and they say, oh, can you show me your notes? Say, sure. You see NaCl, you see Pb for lead, you see Au for gold. That's beautiful. You're not telling me anything. I can't read it. It's chicken scratch, right? You can't make any sense of it. You know why you don't make sense of it? Because they didn't hear the lecture. If they would have heard the lecture, would have made sense. The fact that they didn't hear the lecture, how are they going to make sense of abbreviations? They don't know the shorthand, right? So we know the shorthand. So now, to explain that, the written law is the notes to the lecture, right? That is the notes to the lecture. Now, the entire lecture, where you getting all the rest of the information, right? The rest of the information is oral, and it has to be. Why? Because they're in the desert for 40 years. Most of the events that occurred to the Jewish people, you can just do the math. They were in the desert for 38 years. There were 38 years in between. So what in the world was Moshe teaching them? Right, Moshe Rabbeinu comes down from Mount Sinai, and he says, okay, we're going to review. We're going to review the 10 Commandments. Someone's got a question. Say, Joe in the corner, question. Yeah. So I got a question. So what's the question? It says over here, don't steal. Moshe says, right. What does that mean exactly? How much? No, it just means don't steal. No, we're good. We're just going to review. Don't steal. Don't kill. Don't commit adultery. You have to keep Shabbos up. Joe in the corner, question. Yeah, what's Shabbos? Yeah, don't worry about it. We'll get there. Now, if it's all about review with no definitions, how much time is Moshe Rabbeinu going to be able to speak? Jewish people are going to go nuts. There are no definitions, no nothing. What's he going to do for 38 years? No Netflix, right? No PlayStation, no Xbox. What are they going to do? Be bored, they'd be bored. Okay, let's go through it again. First of the 10 Commandments, then the next, and then now there's this, and now there's that. Then you have holidays. Oh, that's beautiful. We have holidays. How do we, what do we do? That the Torah tells me in Parsha, and more it says I have to sit in a sukkah for 7 days. What's a sukkah? Well, didn't you tell me once you sat in your backyard with a tent, right? You might think it's a tent. Someone else thinks it's a teepee. Someone else thinks it's an igloo. Someone thinks, I don't know, they're going to go outside, sleep in their hammock. Is there any definition what a sukkah is? Now, one answer I got, someone said, it really doesn't matter. Whatever you think it is. I said, how can you say whatever you think it is? Because if you go against what the Torah says, you get punished. It can't be whatever I think. It has to be within certain parameters. So then you ask me, well, what are the parameters? Thank you very much. That's the whole point. The parameters in the written Torah are like the lecture, right? You're getting a lecture, and for 38 years they got the lecture. When Moshe Rabbeinu gave them the notes, right? That's the way to look at it, right? They got the notes. Everything else had to be interpreted. Now you're going to say, they're only men. They don't have the right to interpret, right? So we got another issue, right? Says the Torah, book of Deuteronomy, chapter 17, verse 10, right? It says you go according to the words that they will tell you from the place that Hashem will choose. Be careful to do according to everything that they teach. He was talking about the Kohanim, the Levites. Who are they? The teachers. Who are the teachers? Now, you might say, okay, this is a little bit of an inference, but he's talking about the rabbis, the ones who are going to teach. Verse 11, according to the teachers, they will teach you. According to the judgment, they will say to you, they shall do. You shall not deviate from the word that they will tell you, right or left. Now, simple definition, someone brought me some absolutely weird translation. Now, where the translation came from, it's certainly not in my book, and certainly bad translation from the Hebrew, no question about that, and turned it on its head. Said, okay, you want to mistranslate? Go mistranslate. That's not what it says. Right? I read you word for word what the Torah says. It says whatever they tell you. Right? Whatever they tell you. Whatever judgment they tell you, you are going to do, and you will not deviate. Now, what does do not deviate mean? It means you have to listen to them. In the book of Deuteronomy also speaks about a Zakein Mamre. Zakein Mamre was, let's say, a renegade rabbi. Renegade rabbi went against the majority, right? Torah tells me also, right? Torah tells me I have to go according to the majority for good. So if the majority say this is what you do, this is what you do. So this renegade rabbi says, no, I think I'm right. Now, even if he thought he was right, but the majority think he's wrong, right? Just like in a regular court of Jewish law, you have 3 judges. If 2 vote one way, another judge votes the other way, even if that judge is greater than both of them combined, he loses. Why? Because the Torah tells me clear, you go according to the majority, right? So over here, when the Torah says you have to listen to what they say, that means whatever they say, right? And if you transgress, okay, it's oral law. You transgress, you're liable for the death penalty. You can say, oh, the rabbis put that in to protect themselves. Maybe, right? Maybe that's the case. But the other issue, right? The other issue, as we get to a second, there's another case. The Torah tells me, right? Torah tells me I have to put frontlets between my eyes. Right now, you tell a non-Jew, never read the Bible. Never read the Bible. He says, here, look at this. He goes, Joe, come here, read this. He says, okay. Says you have to put frontlets between your eyes. What's Joe going to say? Got a question. What's a frontlet? I have no idea what a frontlet is. So what does he do? He goes to a piercing parlor, and he says, I want to, can you put frontlets between my eyes? Right? What is that? A sign, what's the sign upon your arm? Tattoo of your mother, Tasmanian devil. What is it? Right? Then it says, you have to put these totafot. Right? What are totafot? We understand they're tefillin. Totafot's not even a Hebrew word. Right? Rashi brings down, it's a Coptic word, meaning it's an African word. So if you have an obligation to do things, and the Torah gives me no definition, there's no possible way that you should be punished. But the Torah tells me clear. We say the second paragraph of the Shema, that if you do the right thing, it's going to be water, there won't be famine, everything's good. You'll get great reward. You do the wrong thing, there's punishment. So if I don't keep the commandments, if I don't keep the positive commandments, the punishment's pretty severe. We might think, okay, there's a mitzvah to put on tefillin. What if someone never put on tefillin in his life? A Jew, even doesn't know anything, loses a portion of the world to come. Right? Just going through something today, where it's brought down that every positive command, to eat matzah, put on tefillin, keep Shabbos, that there's no positive command that is not dependent on the fact that it's dependent on resurrection. That's how powerful it is. You go against it, it's like you go against resurrection. You can say, okay, that's rabbinic. Good, it's rabbinic. It's showing the power. It's showing the power of what the Torah tells me. Right? So now we've given 5, 6 different examples in King David. I think that's a knockout blow. I'm still waiting for an answer. A good answer from Torah scripture. Right? Don't make any hawk-off thing. Give me a puzzle. Give me a verse. Give me something. Right? So get 5, 6 examples. Right? I mean, I could give 20. I could give 50. I could give 100. It's very easy to do because many things don't make sense. They're not. In other words, you're missing the lecture. You only got shorthand. If you only got shorthand, then you're gonna have a million different questions. But what's okay. So you're gonna say all that. We'll come up with some crazy type of answers to answer these questions. You're gonna have to be very clever. Right? I would rather just say, admit that you pick and choose. Right? You're going to light Hanukkah candles? It's rabbinic. You're going to wear tzitzis? It's rabbinic. Just tell me you pick and choose. I won't have an argument. But if you tell me we never rely on the rabbis, and the rabbis made it too difficult, I don't care if the rabbis made it too difficult. What does that have to do with observance? If they tell me I have to do it, I have to do it. That's not a proof that they're not legitimate. That's just saying it's too hard. Who cares? A lot of things too hard. Come to my house, you eat 35 pounds of matzah in 2.5 minutes and you have to whistle Dixie on Passover. That's hard. It's a little bit fun, but that's hard. You're right, it's hard. But that doesn't answer the question. right? We're asking a very specific question. Now, what bothers them to high heaven? We'll get to this question. We'll see if we even get off it. What bothers them is there's another verse. And the other verse says you can't add or subtract to the Torah. Now, this knocks out the Christians. Because the Christians, you get Jeremiah chapter 30, the new covenant. And we talked about a number of these different things, right? When we spoke about the Freemasons, right? They brought all kinds of verses to try and show that angels have free will. But all of it was context. But, right? So you look over there, it's also context. But you can't contradict the prophecy of Moshe. Right? So they have the answer. JC came and he fulfilled it and whatever. But you can't contradict what he says. Right? You can't add or subtract. Right? So come these Karaites and other people, and at the end of the day, right, you're not allowed to add or subtract. But you have to listen to what the rabbis tell you. Now, if the rabbis tell you to do this and not do that or whatever, that's not adding or subtracting. Right? You can say, well, it's a contradiction. That's even better. Tell me it's a contradiction. Over here, tell me, got to listen to the rabbis. Right? In other words, it tells me what? That I can't add or subtract. So if I listen to the rabbis, obviously that means, I shouldn't say obviously, but I would assume that means, I think it's a very simple deduction, and that is if the Torah tells me, now again, God wrote it to Moshe, Moshe passed it down, we'll see if it's the exact same thing, it's a big game of telephone, we'll speak about it, I don't know if we'll speak about it now, we'll see, right? But if we believe that God spoke to Moshe, Moshe wrote it down, Moshe the greatest of all prophets, he's not going to lie. How do I know he's the greatest of all prophets? Because God said so in front of 3 million people, right? 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60, not including women and children. It's about 3 million people. God gives his stamp of approval, right? So you can't contradict Moshe Rabbeinu. Good. Comes on Moshe Rabbeinu. God tells him, tell the Jewish people, can't add or subtract. Good. Now what do I do with this verse in Deuteronomy 17? Right? I have to listen to the rabbis. So I would say very simple. If I have to listen to the rabbis, whatever they tell me to do. Again, it says whatever they tell you to do, right or left. Whatever decree they make. Whatever they tell you. Light Hanukkah candles, don't light Hanukkah candles, keep Shabbos, whatever it is. Whatever they tell you to do, tell me what that means. It means I have to do what they tell me. Every generation. It doesn't say just for now. Right? It doesn't say that in my book. It says this is what you have to do. Right? There's no distinction. Right? I don't even have an oral law over here to tell me. It doesn't know. You know what that verse means? You know what it means for that generation. What do you mean for that generation? Moshe Rabbeinu is telling you for all future generations. If he's telling you for all future generations, then by process of deduction, again, it's a very simple deduction. And the deduction is that if God tells me you have to listen to the rabbis, that means if you listen to the rabbis, that is not a contradiction to the fact of adding or subtracting. Because if they tell you what to do, that's what you do. That's it. That's not adding or subtracting. Right? They made up things that made it too hard. Doesn't matter. Right? What adding or subtracting, I'll give you a definition, a clear-cut definition. Right? If a person's wearing 4 strings, tzitzis on each corner, right? You double them over, they're 8, whatever. Let's say I take 1 away. That's subtracting. Right? Because the rabbis tell me I have to have 4, not 3. What if in my tefillin, my phylacteries, whatever you want to call them, let's say there are 4 parchments, I add 1. Let's say I make another indentation, I put another parchment in there, another compartment. Even if I don't put anything there, forget, whatever. What if I do that? Then I'm adding. That's adding on. If they make decrees, now I don't know why this isn't clear. If they make decrees in order that I should not go against a Torah prohibition. In other words, a lot of the laws of Shabbos, there are Torah prohibitions. A lot of the laws of Shabbos are rabbinical. Why are they rabbinical? Because any Torah prohibition that's there, that we learn from the tabernacle, we learn from the Mishkan, anything that's there, that's a Torah prohibition. Now, what about anything similar? Right? What about anything similar to that? If it's something similar to that, then the rabbis made a decree and said you can't do it. You know why? Because I don't want you to transgress something worse. Give an example. What does the Torah tell me about the laws of Shabbos? One thing it tells me is you're not allowed to light a fire. Okay, what if I light a match? It's not a bonfire. I light a match. Is that the same thing? Well, that might be the same thing. What if I have an electric stove, right? An electric stove is on fire. Well, we might have a difference of opinion here, right? So the example I always give is, okay, stick your face, turn on the electric gas, right? Whether it's gas or whether it's electric, turn it up as high as it'll go for at least 10 minutes, right? 15 minutes, make it really red hot, stick your face on it. I'm not going to do that. I said, why not? It's on fire. I said, you're going to get burned. Oh, is it similar to fire? Right? If I took a torch, right? I took a torch, a bunch of torches, right? Make a fire, make a bonfire. Is that going to get piping hot, 500 degrees or more? 100%. If I turn on this fire, if I turn on this oven, and this oven goes up to 900 degrees, right? A self-cleaning oven, more than 900 degrees. Is that the same thing as my torch? It's even hotter than a torch. You're going to say, but that's not the same thing. You're not lighting a fire. Okay, stick your head in it. Do you get burned? A microwave, you might say, okay, that's a little bit different. Maybe it doesn't work the same way, right? It works on microwaves. Doesn't work like a fire per se, like an oven. Okay, can make a distinction. Maybe that wouldn't be forbidden. You know, the rabbi told it's also forbidden. Regardless, is it similar? So they made a fence around the Torah. And they said, the rabbi said, I don't want you to transgress something more severe. I don't want you to come to Torah prohibition. This is so similar, you might forget it's Shabbos. Right? Milk and meat. You're not allowed to cook a calf in its mother's milk. What about chicken? Does chicken does it fit that criteria? Well, you tell me, is chicken meat? Chicken's meat. Right? I mean, I would say that across the board. I wouldn't say that by fish. Wouldn't call fish meat. Chicken is meat. So how come you're not allowed to eat chicken? How come you're not allowed to eat chicken with milk? Chicken parmesan for a Jew forbidden. Why? Because the rabbis told us you're not allowed to eat it because you might forget. You might forget that it's meat. They might eat red meat. Red meat's a Torah prohibition, right? Red meat with cheese. They have here in Israel. They have glatt kosher treif McDonald's. Why do I say glatt kosher treif? The meat's kosher, the cheese is kosher. You put them both together, that makes a treif, right? That's a Torah prohibition. If it's kosher, if both things are kosher. If they're not kosher, okay, so it's a rabbinic prohibition. Fine. But what are the rabbis telling you? They're telling you that they want to make a fence around the Torah. A fence around the Torah is preserving, so you're not going to come to a more stringent law, meaning you're not going to come to Torah law, right? You don't want to come to Torah law. It's a much more severe prohibition, right, in many ways. So say, but that's adding to the Torah. Again, if I'm preserving and I'm making sure you don't come to a worse prohibition, how in the world is that adding? You say, well, you get a lot more things to do, right? There are a lot more things you got to be careful about. Okay, I agree. That's not adding. Adding is if I actually add to the mitzvah, right? Torah tells me I take a lulav, I got to take some nice smelling fruit, we understand is an esrog, whatever it is, take willows, and I take myrtle leaves. Right, the Torah tells me. What if I take two esrogs? What if I want to take two esrogs? A big one, a small one. What if someone wants to take a watermelon? Someone wants to take a quince. Someone wants to take a pineapple. I want to take a pineapple. It's kind of prickly, right? But whatever, you take a pear, a peach, a plum. How do I know any of these things? Where are my definitions? Right? The Torah is full of questions. Full of questions. Rabbis don't have the right to interpret? How in the world do you get information? What in the world is Moshe Rabbeinu lecturing in the desert for 38 years? What is he doing? Twiddling his thumbs? What is he teaching them? What in the world is he teaching them? They'd be bored out of their mind. Right? How long would it take him to teach all the information and keep reviewing it? A week? A month? 3 months? Okay, 3 million people. It's a lot of people to teach. I get it. Loudspeakers, however he's going to do it. So what if it would take a year? What if it would take a year, then the rest of the time they have to review? Reviewing's not so much fun, right? Learning something new is fun. Reviewing, what I learned before, that's not as much fun. So I'm being generous. 37 years. What in the world did they learn in the desert? They could not have been learning the written word. How do I know? Because there's no possible way they would have understood it. And the reason that they didn't write the oral law with the Torah because no one would have got through it. Right? The oral law is 39 tractates. It's a ton of information. A lot of people don't even go through the entire thing their entire life. Right? Regardless, this wouldn't have been the bestseller. It would have just sat on someone's shelf. You wouldn't have gone through most of it. Right? But when you're reading it, anything you read in the Torah, you got to ask the question, what, where, how, when. Right? That's thinking critical. You're not saying, got to listen to the rabbis. Got to think. Right? This is what learning is. What does this mean? What are the ramifications? There are contradictions. Right? Give one example. There are contradictions how old someone has to be to serve in the temple as a Levite. One place it says 25. Another place it's 30. It's a direct contradiction. Now, if you're a Karaite or a Messianic or whatever, we're not relying on the rabbis. Okay, great. What's the answer? I got a 5-year discrepancy. The Torah does not make mistakes. They agree. We agree. Right? The Torah does not mince words. The Torah does not repeat things. And if something's repeated, it has to be a reason. You can say, I can figure out my own reason. Good. So maybe you have different answers why. But certain things that have direct contradiction or they don't give me legal definition. If they don't give me legal definition, then I can't be punished. Right? They might say, oh, it's philosophical mumbo jumbo. This is clear as day. Right? I don't see any question about it. Because without any legal definition, in a legal society, right, a secular society, there are no laws. I mean, there are laws, no definition. So someone does something, gets taken to jail, right, and he could sit in jail for years. Say, hey, you didn't tell me what this meant. I wasn't given any answers. So why am I punished? Because that's the law you should have known. How was I supposed to know? How in the world was I supposed to know? I thought that stop sign was just good advice. I didn't know. I didn't read the book. You're right. You didn't read the book. But reading the book's not enough. With the greatest minds in the world reading the book, you're not going to get anywhere. You need to read 2 books. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu was learning when he was up on the mountain. He wasn't just learning all the Torah itself. He's also learning oral Torah, what's going to be in the future. Right? And what all this means. Because otherwise doesn't make sense. So I would cut people a lot of slack, and I wouldn't care, and I wouldn't jump up and down, and I wouldn't be screaming and all that if they would just be intellectually honest. But Messianics in general are not. Karaites are not in general. So at least admit that you have to rely on the rabbis for something. Tell me the Masoretic text. Tell me you're going to wear tzitzis, that's rabbinical. Shabbos candles, rabbinical. Hanukkah, rabbinical. You're going to keep kosher, rabbinical. So don't tell me I don't know about the rabbis at all. By definition, you have to, because you would have no translation. And you wouldn't be able to read it and say, no, I know Hebrew. How do you know Hebrew? How do you know the vowels? How do you know how to punctuate the Torah, for goodness sakes? The only reason you know is because the rabbis put vowels there. So if you be intellectually honest, I'll cut you a lot of slack. You tell me it's too hard and whatever, okay, but that's not an argument. That's not an argument that what they say isn't true. And it's certainly not an argument that they don't have a right. Because, according to Deuteronomy chapter 17, they have absolute right. That's clear. Right? Making a fence around the Torah, I don't care what you say, that does not mean they're adding. That's not the definition. The definition is preservation. And even with all that, let's say I cut you all the slack. I'm in a generous mood. I haven't even had any caffeine. I'm in a very generous mood. Even if you tell me you don't know according to the rabbis, everything I said, out the wind, I can do what I want. I can make up my own thing. It really doesn't matter. I'll make up my own definitions. I'll make up my own religion. I'm only going to follow God. That's beautiful. I have one other question. And my other question is, with all the philosophical stuff, you show me that it works. The Torah, the Bible, whatever you want to call it, is supposed to be for all time, for all generations. Now, you might have a question. Look at all the Jews that are intermarrying. right? 60, 70, 80% into marriage, right? Isn't that bad? That's bad. They're not holding according to what the Torah says, right? Not because of the rabbis. It's all because of desire. They're not asking those questions. They're asking, do I put ketchup or mustard on my hot dog? That's the most important question to them, right? They're not asking these other questions, right? So we're losing millions just by ignorance, right? Okay, that doesn't mean what we do isn't true, right? And we have the highest success rate of anyone, right? At least a 95% success rate for the next generation. So if a Karaite, Messianic, whatever you want to call them, they say we don't have to hold according to this. I want to know the majority of the time that they pass this down to the next generation. I don't care philosophy. I don't care anything else. I want to know 60% of the time at least it works for their entire congregation, not just some of them, not just some who live in the Bible Belt, not just some who live over here, across the board. Well, you're going to tell me if they don't listen to the rabbis, you get 90% into marriage. Yeah, it's not because they don't listen to the rabbis. You're right. They don't listen to the Torah. They don't care about anything. But it's not philosophical, right? 99% of them is all desire. Totally not philosophical. So that's irrelevant, right? It's not because it doesn't work, right? If they come to our camp, it works, right? But see, that's another thing they're not going to admit, is the fact that, okay, you want to be a fossil. These things don't work. It's proven it doesn't work, right? I don't care if you have 50,000 Karaites out there. They're relevant. They're not going to perpetuate something if the Torah has to be eternal. Even if certain things fall by the wayside, that they don't apply because we blew it, does not mean the Torah is not eternal. Karaites will agree. Well, Messianics agree that it's eternal. Good. So even 100% they agree it's eternal. How can you have a 2% a 2% success rate? A 5% success rate, if that. Not even. It's much less than that. Right? So I'm very big in statistics. So forget everything I said. Show me it works. Right? But, the question we asked, I guess, I guess we'll end with this. We're not going to get to the other two parts, but the other, the Davidic line is a pretty serious thing. Everyone agrees we're living in the Messianic era. Right? That everyone agrees. Right? The only question is when the Messiah is going to come. But if the future Jewish Messiah is going to come, and he's going to come from the Davidic line, you better believe he's got to be Jewish. Right? I mean, if you're a believing person, unless you're a Messianic, right, or a Christian, you better believe he's Jewish, but they got to go back to King David. Everyone agrees you got to go back to the Davidic line. If there is no Davidic line, he's a non-Jew, he's a non-starter. Then this whole thing is a joke. We're just blowing smoke and wasting time. That could be. We should just, have a couple shots of scotch. I think that's what, and have a good time and call it a night. Right? That's what we would do. So, in that case, that is, I think, such a serious question. Someone's going to come up with an answer, outside, come out and answer without outside of rabbinic law, outside of oral law. Oral law has an answer, right? It has a few different answers, but it's got one main answer, right? I'm not going to give the answer, but it's got one answer. So you want to tell me I only follow the Torah? I need an answer, right? She cannot convert ever. Forever means forever. Don't tell me that generation. Don't tell me this, right? Doesn't matter what's in her heart. Doesn't matter what she does. Conversion will be invalid. She won't be allowed to come back to the land of Israel. Finished. Right? She's not allowed to come back on the law of return. She's not Jewish. Period. Can't do it. King David comes from her. There's got to be something else going on because he's got to be Jewish. And if he's not Jewish, we have no Messiah, and that's it. So, there are hundreds of examples in the Torah itself that beg for interpretation. The Torah didn't leave it vague for no reason. If the Torah left it vague, the Torah cannot punish. Because if the Torah punishes, that's not fair. It's like someone's holding your arm behind your back, and that's it. And there's no way to win. There's no way to get to the next world. You're finished. You did this. Oh, I didn't know about that. Too bad. Right? That only works with the Noahide laws. That those are things that are universal. Right? If it's universal, you didn't know about it. You're a fool. Right? Because it's universal. It's things that everyone knows. Don't kill. Don't murder. Don't steal. Those things are obvious. Those things are 100% obvious. So they can't say after 120 years, hey, what happened? Why did this happen to me? So didn't you know you're not allowed to steal? Like, no, but that's different. There's that. It's universal. That's universal. But there are so many examples. I only hit a few. There are many, many, many examples. Don't have answers in the Torah. Torah is vague. Extremely vague. And no definition. And, don't murder. Very good. What does that mean? Self-defense. I don't know. Just says don't murder. Pull the plug. That's not murder. That's mercy. Where are the definitions? If it's such a legal document, you need legal definitions. Right? So the rabbis gave us legal definitions because you need that running commentary. Otherwise, nothing makes sense. Right? Not one verse in this Torah will make sense, if there's not a running commentary. And, and again, you won't get punished. It wouldn't be fair if you would get punished for that. Why in the world, what, God, a big ogre? No, I'm going to zap you anyway because you're evil. You're evil from the beginning. And because you're evil from the beginning, that's it. I'm not giving you any definitions. Whatever happens, happens. I don't know. That sounds like chaos to me. Right? Worst chaos. Worst chaos than could ever be. So, food for thought. Anyone's got any, if they find any source in the Torah, legal definitions of all these different things, I'm willing to listen. I'm open to listen. Right? But, I think the Torah begs for explanation. And the explanation has to come from somewhere. Right? Say, wow, they're only men. You're right, they're only men. You say, my opinion just as valid. Right? But is that what it means? Is it universal? Is it for all generations? Is it something that it can be passed down? It's workable. If it's not, right? If it doesn't pass one generation, it's over. Right? Even if it passes one generation, it's not going to last. It can't. None of these other groups have lasted. They won't last. It's impossible. Without, the Reform and Conservative movement, they're finished. Right? It's just a matter of time. With all that intermarriage, how could it last? How could it be passed down? Doesn't matter what your philosophy is. Right? Forget all the examples. Does it work? If it doesn't work, that's it. In my opinion.
Right.
You have anything to add?
Yeah, I know we don't have near enough time to cover the other two topics. Oh man,
I figured I wanted to hit enough of one thing, and I was okay if I get to the other things, I get to them. But
Yep, and
that's what I wanted to hit.
Yeah, I hear you. So we probably could. I'll say could, but rather than should. Although I'm actually okay with whatever you choose to do, but we'll keep it open in case somebody recommends a topic that would be a hot topic, controversial, of course, that we could discuss next week. If we don't, then we'll go ahead and move on to number 2. How do we know for sure it's actually oral, or is this something the rabbi has just totally made up? Now, you didn't say that. I kind of added that part in there, but that's probably what we should add in because that's part of the claim too. So right.
Yeah.
And so, just as a final note, and again, I'm no expert in any oral law or anything like that. I just know that the concept of the oral law, and I've mentioned this in the beginning of the show, and I say this now again because there's been some live viewers who have been watching the chat. You always have the people who are skeptics, and I'm using that term very, very generically. The term that came to mind was way worse than that, but I'm going to refrain from that. They were skeptics, and they come in making a bunch of accusatory remarks on how stupid people are and all this other stuff. But I'm thinking just the mere logic of it alone, to me, only makes sense that if Christianity has to use, and I'm repeating myself, if Christianity can't read the Old, I'm going to call it Old Testament. I know that's not right. I'm going to call it the Old Testament because that's what they know it by. If they can't read the Old Testament several ways, number one, in its original language to begin with, they need an interpretation. They need help. If they had the help and they still can't read it and understand it, which they can't because you can't read through the Torah in English even and know what most of that stuff even means. And so you either have
Imagine
to...
the bad translations with the thous and the thises and...
Right.
We think of better translations today.
Right, but I mean, if they can't take the whole Bible itself and know what it means, they have to have help. And if you think you don't, then you literally are saying that by default that you'll only do the things that you understand, which may only be a handful of stuff to begin with, which means you're ignoring the rest of it. So you reach out to the Strong's Concordance because that's what Christians use to understand words. So now the Strong's Concordance has become your oral law, your written law, whatever you call it, your second law that you would criticize Jewish people for using their own. The difference is they know their own language. Y'all don't. I didn't. I'm learning it now. So the logic, just mere logic alone, to me suggests that there had to be something. I mean, there was over 7,000 hours that Moses spent on Mount Sinai. You can read the Bible, the Christian and Hebrew Bible together combined, nonstop. You can actually read through it in less than 80 hours. That's been a proven fact, right?
Xbox. He's playing Xbox. Come on.
So if that's true, then what was Moses doing up there for 7,000 hours? Now, maybe let's just say conservative. Let's say 2,500 hours, just to chop numbers way down low. They were doing more than just talking about the basic writings of every commandment. I mean, it doesn't take that long, especially if Hashem did it the first time. It was probably instantaneously. Why did he even need 40 days up there to begin with? They weren't talking about Oprah Winfrey or how to go, when's the next big fishing tournament. There was nothing else to talk about. I mean, you're in the presence of the creator of this universe. Makes no sense to me. Yeah, so, and it's not, and again, I'm not criticizing those who do it because I actually didn't believe myself for so many years. And I'm just, the more I study, the more things you have to be able to rationalize with good common sense as well. And so that's kind of where I'm at, I'm not saying I'll be public with this. I'm not saying I agree with everything, but it's not up to me to agree or disagree. It's not up to me. I can tell you whether I believe in the whole thing or I don't believe in the whole thing. When you go to school, when you pick a school for your kids, you can't say, well, I like Roosevelt High School's football team, but I like such and such's basketball team, and I like such and such's math curriculum, so I'm going to send my kid to all three schools. Doesn't work that way. You got to pick a school, regardless of their flaws, and stick with it.
Either you buy into the system or you don't. Right, but you can't say I buy into part of it and the rest is garbage.
Right, and
that's what they're saying. That's pretty much what they're saying. I'll do what I want, what makes sense or whatever. I don't care, and I'll listen to them for what I want, and what I don't want, I'll chuck. But at least admit that if you admit you're doing that, I don't necessarily have an issue.
That's kind of how
I think it's wrong.
That's kind of where I'm at too, because it's like. But I've been told my whole life, you're doing this, do everything as unto the Lord. I mean, that's big time, and that's a major thing, especially in Christianity. Right. Do everything as unto the Lord, right? Oh, everything except for obey the commandments is what it looks like. Not being rude, just being fair. So that's kind of why I'm taking a little bit of issue with things. But like you said, if you just be intellectually honest with yourself and understand it takes more than just the written text, and then also be kind and honest with others. Telling if you're doing this, don't say you're not doing it. It's very clear that you are. So that's the point.
Right. One other point, and and people say all kinds of things, and Talmud says this, and Talmud says that. You're right. You pull things out of context. You can't read the Aramaic. You can't read the Hebrew. I don't care if you read the English, but you're missing the whole context. If you miss the whole context, you can't pluck it out and say, "Oh, look, the rabbi's this, the rabbi's that." But you're missing what the whole point is. Right? They say, oh, the rabbis are racist. But what does it mean?
Right.
What does the statement mean?
Now,
we had a whole list of, of good topics. Like, wow, I hope we have answers for this. If you take them out of context, 100%, it looks absolutely crazy. I agree, 100%. You have to see it in context.
Yeah. After my next comment, there's going to be a lot of people probably wanting to ask to add questions into the text of the live chat, but we're fixing to end, so you won't have much time. But this comment is. I've had a friend of mine. I've repeated this on probably one of our very first shows that we ever did. And so had an old friend of mine. We were Christians together, and then we split up for years, and I became a Messianic. And when we reconnected, wow, he was a Messianic too, right? And then I started leaving the Messianic thing, going more towards Judaism, and then he knew that, so he started sending me these links, these links on the websites that shows how horrible and how just like really evil the Talmud is. And when he first sent them to me, I was literally I was completely in shock. And then so fortunately, I have an Orthodox friend of mine who is fluent in Hebrew, and he also has been studying the Talmud at that time for over 2 or 3 years, and that was the first things that he covered was all the controversial issues. And every single one of the claims that Christians make, they have on the websites all these Messianic people, and they make all these dynamic claims, and I won't mention the titles of any of them now because it's too late. But they're absolutely, they're borderline. Well, not borderline. They're illegal as hell. Pardon the expression. That's why they call it such an evil Talmud. After I researched it and find out from the actual Jewish people themselves, not from the Christians who are trying to make them look bad, all of a sudden these claims are just they just dissolve like sand and pouring water over sand, and your hand just totally falls through the cracks. It makes no sense whatsoever. They do their best they can to make the Talmud look like it's evil and just not from God. But the thing is, I'm telling you, if you're a Christian, Messianic, watching the show today, stop going to Christian websites to find out what the Jewish people think on the oral law. Go to the source. Don't go to people who disapprove of it. You got to find out what it really means. That's my point. Rabbi, you did a great job. We're definitely going to have to hit this again. I know I said maybe, but it looks like we might need to go ahead and push forward and get these. This
is why we do controversial issues. That's it. And if any show you ever want to hate, this is the one you have to listen to, because this is why we get the big ratings.
This is why I don't get monetization on the show.
This is why I don't get scotch.
All right, guys. Man, Rabbi, I love you. Thank you, man. Great job. And everybody else, we'll see you next week, same time, same place. Be sure to go to the website, TanakTalk.com. Check it out. Also, there's some resources on your screen right now. But Counter-Missionary Work, Judaism and Christianity, A Contrast by Rabbi Stuart Federow, Revealing Matthew's Secrets by Jason LaCrosse, Leaving Jesus by James Wood Jr., and, of course, the 2-volume book set. The CDs are not available, but the audio is. OutreachJudaism.org. Rabbi Tovia Singer, Let's Get Biblical. Outstanding work. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you soon. If you want to reach Rabbi Coffman, you reach him at orthodoxconversion.com or Orthodox, I'm looking at it right now, hold on, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism on Facebook. Y'all have a great week. Shalom, shalom.
לובשים בכל האופנים, זה פניהם של אנשים שונים. נזכור בסוף, כולנו שותפים. חשוב תמיד להיות